Hello friends, I am Laura Nelkin and welcome to the tips and tricks tutorial for clue number 3 of Cowltopus. This is going to cover pages 9 and 10 of your pattern, and I bet your tentacles are tingling because y'all still aren't quite sure what we are doing. On our needles, we have clues 1 and 2. They look like this. And those of you who have guessed that we are making an octopus mantle, I'm going to tell you, you are right. So in clue 3, we're going to look at how to join clues 1 and 2 together and start working in the round in a cowl shape. What's very fun about clue 3 is you have some decisions to make. So before we get going with those, I want to tell you that you do need to have purchased the pattern to follow along with this video. If you haven't purchased Cowltopus and you are intrigued and you want to join us, it is never too late to knit Cowltopus. You can knit it after the whole mystery knit-along is done. You can knit it anytime, and these videos will help you with each step of the pattern. So let's jump right in with that decision that we need to make. Okay, I know some of you knitters like your knitting to be complex, and I have the Complextopus option for you. Complextopus is brioche all the way with your Cowltopus. So you can choose to work Complextopus, or you can choose to go Simplopus and keep things simple with 2 by 2 by color ribbing. I'm going to suggest that you watch through this video and learn the tips and tricks for both of those options before you decide which you want to do. The first thing that I have to show you, and it's the same for both Complextopus and Simplopus, is that setup round which joins you into the round. First thing though, when you ended clue 2, you should have 95 stitches on your needles. So take a second and count your stitches. If you have more or less than that, this setup round is your chance to get your stitch count correct. If you are working Complextopus, you're going to want to end with 94 stitches on your needle. There's 1 stitch decreased in that. And if you are working Simplopus, you're going to want to end with 96 stitches, and there's 1 stitch increased. So to quote my friend Tim Gunn, this is going to be your make it work moment. This is your chance to get your stitch count correct. Create your stitch count correctly before you jump in. So let's just do that setup round together. I've got my clues 1 and 2 right here on my needles. I'm going to show you how to join that together into the round, and then I'll show you Complextopus next. Okay, so the setup round is worked with your contrast color, and it is worked with your needle B. Needle B is 1 size smaller than the needle that you used for clues 1 and 2, and it should be 16 inches to 20 inches long. I've got a 16-inch needle here. And now the first thing that you're going to do is undo that last stitch that you worked on clue 2, and then take that stitch and put it on to the beginning of the round right there. And before you do that, make sure that your main color is to the back. And now what you're going to do with your contrast color, and I'm just going to get my tension here to make sure that you can really see this, is you are going to knit 2 together right there. And what you have done in that move is joined your knitting into the round. And now you're going to continue along working that setup round. If you have not removed your stitch markers, like I haven't, which it said to do at the end of clue 2, you can go ahead and do that now. So I knit 2 more stitches, and now I am going to start purling all the way around to the last 3 stitches, and I'm going to knit those last 3 stitches. And that is how easy it is to work that setup round. The big trick is that knit 2 together. Now, if we look back at that, If you feel like, and you might feel like you have a little bit of a gap right here, do you remember when you were doing your yarn setup? I said that if you were working with a magic ball for your main color, that you should hold back about 12 inches of the magic of the MC3. That right there will help you close this up when we get to the finishing steps in clue 4. If you forgot to do that, when you get to the end of your MC3 color in either Complextopus or Simplopus, cut out 12 inches of your MC3. If you're working with a solid color for your main color, you're going to have some left over at the end, and you will use that to tidy things up a little bit. So I know some of you are wondering, like, why did she have us do that? Where is that coming into play? It's coming into play right there. You might decide you don't need it, but I wanted you to have it if you did feel like you wanted it. So now that you've worked the setup round, let's dive in with Complextopus first and talk about brioche. Okay, as I said in the intro, Complextopus uses brioche. Brioche stitch is one of my favorite knitting stitches. I feel like it gets a bad name and people think that it is very hard. I find it very easy to work. I'm going to give you a link in the show notes to my favorite video for fixing brioche mistakes if you run into a mistake. My friend Bristol has the best, easiest little video to watch. So I'll give that to you if you run into a problem while you are working at clue 3. What I will tell you about brioche is we are working brioche in the round, which I think is objectively easier because you're working the same thing on every round. One thing about brioche is every round actually has 2 parts. It has a pass with your main color and then a pass with your contrast color. But because we're working in the round, your main color is always going to be doing brioche knits, and your contrast color is always going to be working brioche purls. So it's very easy to see if you've gone off in the pattern if that is not true as you are working your stitches. So I think the easiest way for me to show you how I work brioche is just to dive right in. On page 9, I do give you my kind of book about brioche and how I like to work it and how I like to think about it. So if you're new to brioche and you haven't worked it before, I do suggest reading that to give yourself a really clear understanding of the brioche stitch. So the first thing with brioche is you need to work a setup round before you get going working the brioche stitch with your 2 colors. And I have just like a little sample right here of some cast on stitches in the contrast color because that's what you have on your needles from working the setup round. And I'm going to start with the main color and the setup round 1. Okay, the setup round 1 is a 2-stitch repeat, so I think that you're going to find it's quite easy to work. What I'm going to do right here is knit the first stitch. We know how to do that, and I'm with the main color here. And now I'm going to bring my yarn to the front of my work, and I'm going to slip the next stitch. And at the same time, I'm going to make a yarn over with the main color over my needle. And then I am bringing the yarn to the back of my work so that I can knit the next stitch. And then you'll see I do this kind of as one move. I bring the yarn to the front, I make the yarn over and leave the yarn to the back so that I can work the next knit stitch. So this is called a slip one yarn over, this maneuver right here. I'm knitting one, I'm bringing my yarn to the front, slipping that stitch, knitting one, bringing my yarn to the front, slipping that stitch, knitting one, and I am continuing that maneuver all the way around. I'm on these little flexi flips, so I need to get to the second part of the round right here, and I am ready to go with a knit stitch, and I'm going to continue this all the way around. You'll be working in the round with your needle B that you set up with at the beginning of that setup round. So you'll just be able to work all the way around like this. Okay, here's something important. When we end, we're ending with a slip one yarn over, and things are going to feel a little loosey-goosey, so I'm going to set that needle aside. If your contrast color stitch underneath there gets a little loose, you can tighten that up. The most important thing when you're working brioche in the round is after you work that last stitch, you're always going to take your working yarn and leave it to the front of your work and kind of pull it over to the right so that it is out of the way. And now I am ready at the beginning of the round, and I am going to be working with a contrast color, and I'm just getting myself all tidied up right there. Keep that slip one yarn over right there. And now I am going to get my needle, and I am working the setup round 2 with the contrast color. And the first thing that I'm going to do is work a slip one yarn over with the contrast color, but I'm going to leave my contrast color to the front of my work because that next stitch is a brioche purl. And a brioche purl has me working together that slip one yarn over from the previous row with that contrast color stitch. So I'm brioche, I'm just purling those 2 stitches together. And now I've got a slip one yarn over. My contrast color is going to stay to the front of my work. And then I've got a brioche purl. And now I've got a slip one yarn over and a brioche purl. You'll see that whenever I have a stitch that does not have a yarn over it, I am pulling my yarn over it and making that yarn over. And then whenever I have a stitch that has that main color going over it, I'm doing the brioche purl. And that is the big rule for brioche. If it has a pair, you're working it together. If it's on its own, you're making that yarn over. And I'm going to continue to work that all the way around with the contrast color. And now I have what we call in the industry a step out to show you what that looks like after you've worked a few rounds. Okay, so let's pretend that we've worked a few rounds, we've worked our setup round, and we've kind of gotten into working our brioche. I have just finished with a contrast color, and remember I said you always leave the last color that you worked to the front of your work all the way to the right. So now I am going to work a round 1 with a main color. And so I'm going to be brioche knitting, which we have not done together yet because I have that slip one yarn over with the contrast color over that main color stitch right there. I'm going to work those 2 stitches together. And now I'm going to do a slip one yarn over, and I'm going to brioche knit, slip one yarn over, brioche knit, slip one yarn over, brioche knit, and I'm going to continue like that all the way around. Remember, if I have that slip one yarn over the stitch, it's a brioche knit, and then I'm making that slip one yarn over that contrast color stitch. So 2 passes for every round. This is the main color pass. I'm just going to get to the end of the round and I'm going to show you what happens with this main color, and then we're going to look at what happens with the contrast color. All right, I'm just to the end of the round. I'm making that last slip one yarn over, and I'm taking my main color, bringing it to the front and leaving it all the way to the right. And then I'm moving over my end of round marker, and I'm getting ready to work with my contrast color. The first thing that I'm going to do is a slip one yarn over and then a brioche purl. So with the contrast color, I am always brioche purling, and with the main color, I am always brioche knitting. And if you keep that in your mind as you get going with this, I am sure that you're going to have success brioche knitting. Now my round is getting a little tight there, so let me move my stitches over. Slip one yarn over, brioche purl, and I'm going to continue around like that. And when I get to the end of the round, I'm going to leave my yarn to the front of the work, bring it all the way over to the right, and then grab the main color and start a pair of rounds again. Now you're going to be wondering how long you are supposed to be doing this, and your pattern will tell you. For Complextopus, if you are working with a magic ball for your main color, you're going to be repeating the round 1 MC and round 1 CC until your main color 3 is used up and you're ending with a CC round. You might find that you have a partial bit of MC3 left, or you go a little bit into your main color 4 of the magic ball to finish an MC round. That is absolutely fine. Remember, if you didn't keep a 12-inch piece from your main color 3, now is the time to snip that out of there. If you are not working with a magic ball and you're working with a solid color like I am, you're going to end up working round 1 MC and CC a total of 19 times. And again, you want to end with that CC round. So that is written into the pattern. I know a few of you have been worried that you're going to run out of yarn. This happens with mystery knit-alongs because you don't know what you're knitting. You don't have a picture of what it's supposed to look like. You're kind of like, am I on track? Do I have enough yarn to make this? I have written this pattern so that you cannot run out of yarn. It's impossible to, unless you did not purchase enough and didn't follow the guidelines for yardage. So clue 4 is written in a way that you will be absolutely fine and you will not run out of yarn. I have been giving you information about yarn usage in the tips and tricks thread, which I will link below in the video notes. And I'll make sure I've been answering people if they have questions in Facebook and Ravelry group about yarn usage, but don't worry about it. You're fine, I promise. So those are details about Complextopus, and some of your minds might feel like they're exploding. Some of you might be like, oh, I got this brioche thing. Others of you love brioche like I love brioche, and I know you're already diving in with this brioche thing and you didn't need to watch me go over that slowly. Wherever you're at, know that you can ask questions, but let's look at the Simplopus option next. I'm actually going to do Simplopus on my next version because it's got this really fun 2x2 ribbing with a few tricks I think you're going to have a great time with. Okay, Simplopus friends, let's talk about this option. It's really fun to knit. And as I dove into the swatches for this, I was like, oh, I'm doing this version on my next one because it's a really fun 2-color 2x2 ribbing. And what 2x2 ribbing means is 2 knit stitches, 2 purl stitches. And I do have a few tricks. One, to keep your knitting neat, and also to make sure that you don't end up with this funky thing that can happen when you switch colors in 2x2 ribbing. And let me show you what I mean. So on my needles right here, I have some ribbing that I have been working, and you can notice that it's really, really neat. Isn't that neat 2-color ribbing? So typically when I've done 2-color ribbing in the past, if I switch to the other color, the opposite color from the previous round or row, you'll see that what happens on the purl stitches when you switch colors is you end up with a little bit of the contrast color showing over the main color. So it makes the purl columns not totally neat, which I don't love. But if you work your ribbing in a 3-round repeat, where the first round is just a knit round, it avoids that problem completely. So if you look down at my swatch right here, you'll see the first round of every set of 3 rounds is a knit round, but what happens with the purl stitches is it kind of compresses the fabric a little bit right there and makes it so that you don't end up with that funny little purl stitch in the color change. So I'm on a knit round right now. This is actually round 4 with the contrast color. If you are working Simplopus, and this is important to say, you've worked the setup round, you have counted your stitches twice and made sure that you have 96 stitches, and then you will start with round 1, which is a knit round with your main color, and then you'll start working the 2x2 ribbing as written in the pattern. I am just finishing up round 4 here, which is a knit round with the contrast color. And then there's a few things I want to talk about color changes. Sorry. If you watched the brioche section, you're going to remember that I had you holding the color that you weren't working with to the front. It is different for the Simplopus version. If you are, when you get to the beginning of the round, the color that you're not working with for those 3 rounds, make sure that you have it to the inside of your work and then off to the back so that it is not caught and not getting carried up or twisted in every round. And that is because otherwise it will show on the right side of your work. And when you go to work the first round with that knit stitch, you will just carry it up loosely when you're working that first stitch. And you'll see if I show you on the inside right here, you can see those stitches getting carried up right there. They're not going to show, but it makes the join of the round so much neater, which I really care about for this. So I just pulled out a stitch. Give me a second. I'm going to fix that and then we're going to get going. All right. I am on round 5 with the contrast color. And you're going to see that the first thing that it says on round 5 is to lift up the right leg of the stitch below the stitch on the needle. So this right leg right here, and then you're going to put that onto the needle. And then with the contrast color, you're going to knit those 2 stitches together. What that maneuver does is gets rid of the jog that will happen when you switch colors at the beginning of the round. And that is done on round 5 and round 2. And now I'm going to knit the next stitch. And now I'm going to get into my 2x2 ribbing where I'm knitting 2, purling 2 around. But as we do that, you're going to notice that when I do my purl stitches, I wrap my yarn opposite than the way that I wrap my yarn when I work my knit stitches. So typically when I work a stitch so that I have the right leg to the front and the left leg to the back. On ribbing only, when I work my purl stitches, I wrap my yarn opposite, so the left leg is to the front and the right leg is to the back. You do not have to do this. You can work your purl stitches the way that you have worked purl stitches in the past, as you might have worked them at other points in Cowltopus. The reason that I do this is I find that my 2x2 ribbing, when I don't do this, this column of knit stitches gets really baggy and kind of unsightly, and it makes my 2x2 ribbing look a little bit sloppy. But if I work my purl stitches opposite, then when I get to the next row, you'll see that I'm going to work them through the back loop. And we're going to get all the way around so that I can show you that. And what that does is change the amount of yarn that is being used for the purl stitch and tightens up that knit stitch a little bit so that it is just a little bit tighter. So I'm going to get to the end of the round and then I'm going to show you how you work into those stitches on round 6. Okay, I'm on round 6. I'm back at the beginning of the round. You will see that I'm making sure that I'm not catching my main color at all. I'm just leaving it hanging to the back of my work. And now I am going to go ahead and I'm working a knit 2, purl 2 around. But I want to show you what happens when I get to those purl stitches. You'll see when I get to these purl stitches that they're mounted backwards with the left leg to the front and the right leg to the back. I'm going to work it through the back leg so that I'm not twisting my stitch. I'm not making a twisted rib. I'm still making a rib where the stitch is open and not twisted, but working it in that opposite direction makes it so that my knit columns are more tidy. By all means, if you don't feel like doing this with your ribbing or you've never noticed this problem with your 2x2 ribbing, just go ahead and work your purl stitches, what I would call normally and not mounted in the other direction. Some people call this an Eastern mount. Here's one purl stitch where I didn't work it in the opposite direction, so you'll see I'm going to work it through the front. Please let me know if you have any questions about this. My goal with Mystery Knit-alongs is to teach you new little tips and tricks to help you make your knitting more neat or tidy, or little things that I've found that help my knitting be more neat or tidy. You might not need them, so take them or leave them, but ask questions. So fun for me to do these deep dives with you. Pardon the Cowltopus pun right there. So those are my little tricks about Simplopus. It's simple, but it's still got a few little details that make it tidy and neat and interesting to knit, I think. So, where are we? Again, with yarn usage, if you are working Simplopus, you are going to continue with that 6-round repeat, ribbing round 1 through ribbing round 6, until you run out of contrast color 3. Make a note of whatever round you end on. It doesn't even matter if you end in the middle of a round. Just end at the end of contrast color 3, set your knitting down, and then we're going to come back at clue 4, and I'm excited to show you what happens next. So clue 4, when does clue 4 come out, everybody? Here we go. Clue 4 comes out on October 23rd. That is our final clue for Cowltopus. I'm excited to go over in one more video with you the tips and tricks that you'll need to know for that clue. So come back next week. Get your clue 3 done. Ask any questions that you have in the Ravelry or Facebook groups. One thing I was going to kind of mention is if you ask a question in Facebook, you don't also need to ask it in Ravelry and vice versa. We are checking both, and it actually just makes more work for us if we have to answer you in both places. I promise your question won't get lost in the shuffle. Thank you so much for knitting along with me and trusting me. I think I'd like to end this video by asking the Magic 8 Ball a question. And the Magic 8 Ball, let's ask it, should we Complextopus or Simplopus together? Who knows what's going to happen? It's going to ask for a haiku or juggling yarn balls, Max, right? Oh, it says finish a whip, which is a work in process, but we can't quite do that yet until we have gotten to clue 4. So get cracking on clue 3, and I'll see you for clue 4 next week. Happy knitting.